So welcome everyone to Career Outcomes for Engineering Psych, Cognitive Brain Sciences, and Human Factors majors. My name is Malaika Silkat, and I'm here on behalf of the Tufts Career Center. And you'll see there our website right at the bottom. So if this is your first time at a Career Center event, welcome. If you're a returner, we welcome you as well. I guarantee that this is going to be an information-packed, exciting panel where you'll learn about careers and meet some of our wonderful alumni that have decided to give us their time tonight. At this time, I would also like to acknowledge the support of several faculty and staff from the School of Engineering that helped us kind of brainstorm panelists. Also Robin Kahn, who is our career advisor for the School of Engineering, who is going to be managing the chat. So you can wave, Robin, if your camera is on. And I also like to send a special shout out to the Center for STEM Diversity as well, who also helped us to promote our event, as well as in-house in the Career Center. So our format today is pretty much going to be, and actually, sorry, I have it here. I'm going to do just a quick introduction of our speakers. Again, my name is Malaika Silkat, and I'm one of the career advisors in the Tufts Career Center, and I will be moderating the panel. Robin will monitor the chat, so if you have any burning questions, we do have the questions that some of you had submitted in advance, but we will start taking live questions from our audience around 5:20 or so. And then at 5:40, just some closing remarks. If any of our panelists are able to stay after, I know Isha cannot, we can put you guys in a separate breakout room, depending on how many students are left and want to stay after that. But we'll check in again with you later on. So that's the format. Also on this screen, I just wanted to include 5 different resources. I'll try to put them in the chat at some point. But if you are a sophomore or freshman and you're trying to decide on a major, hopefully this event will help you with that. But we have a section of the Career website, Career Center website designated for exploring majors and careers. Our Tufts First Destinations, which gives you information on where students go right after they graduate. The HERD, which is an alumni database for mentoring, where you can actually get advice from an alumni who's decided to be a mentor. Our Career Lab drop-in hours that you can get drop-in advice. And if you want to make an appointment, you can do so with your Handshake account. So just reminding people of those resources. Okay, so I would like to introduce our panelists, and if you could just wave very quickly as I call your name. Our first panelist is joining us is Gina Doyle. Gina, do you want to wave? And Gina is a product designer for GitLab and received her Bachelor of Science in Engineering Psychology and is a member of the Tufts University class of 2018. So welcome, Gina. Our next panelist is Isha Patnaik. And Isha is a senior user researcher at the New York Times. Isha has a Bachelor of Science in Cognitive and Brain Sciences and is a member of the Tufts University class of 2017. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Emma Levitt. Emma is a senior human factors engineer for Johnson & Johnson Medical Devices, and Emma received her Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and Human Factors Engineering and is a member of the Tufts University class of 2015. So it's my pleasure, especially during Women's History Month, to welcome these 3 alum who are making history at their organizations and in their industries. So welcome all of you today. Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to jump in with the first question for our alum. So in any order, can you tell us about your current role and a little bit about your organization, maybe the size, where you're located, some of the titles of people on your team, anything you want to tell us about your organization and what you do? Who would like to start?
I can go. You can go first.
Okay.
All right. So my current role, I'm Gina. first of all, if you forgot. But my current role is product designer at GitLab. And GitLab is a DevOps platform. So I primarily have worked in the software industry, and I design like the experience of the product, and it spans across some research stuff as well. So I run research projects at my company too. GitLab is only 1,200 employees. We're a very small company, and it is fully remote. So it's actually not located. We don't have an office. I myself am located in Uxbridge, Massachusetts, and I work from home every day. You can like work in coworker spaces as well, but I just choose to work from home. It's easier for me. And then I do some contracting on the side. So I'm a UX like freelance designer as well. And the company that's under is SVG Consulting Group, and I actually own it with my family. We all do like engineering / software type of stuff. And for that right now, I'm working with Instacart, which is the food delivery application, and then a startup for real estate. And that is I'm primarily the only designer for that, and it's fully remote as well. Hopefully I got most of the things that you asked for.
That's great, great. And I also wanted just to note that part of the reason we chose these three incredible women panelists is they've been doing a lot of different things at different companies throughout their career since leaving Tufts. So thank you for providing that depth of experience. So Isha, why don't we have you go next? What do you do in your current role, and tell us a little bit about, you can tell us a little bit about the New York Times and maybe your department and where you work.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. Also, I'm Isha. I'm a senior researcher at the Times. New York Times being the newspaper you might know and love, maybe not love, which is okay. I currently work on a few different product streams. My main product streams are live and breaking news. So I'm trying to answer questions around how do we better serve people when they're trying to stay up to date with in the moment news, and how can we design our story formats to better serve them. Being a researcher, I talk with our users. I talk with readers all across the world.
I think your audio went out.
Your headphones probably cut out.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
can hear
cool. I don't know what happened. Just okay.
That's okay.
Yes, as I was saying, I do surveys, things like that. I also work on our international audience, and I also work with our community track, so commenting. I work with product designers like Gina. I work with product managers, people in the newsroom all across the organization. And yeah, the Times has 5,000 employees, including journalists all around the world. And I feel really excited to be here. I've been here since August.
Great.
I don't know what's happened. 1 second.
And Emma.
Hey everyone, I'm Emma Levitt. I just transitioned to Johnson & Johnson. Ethicon, which is a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. It's a humongous company, over 10,000 employees worldwide. So I previously was in consulting. So I just left my job in consulting at the end of the year, which was very small, maybe 30, 40 people, went to one of the largest companies. So I'll speak to that throughout our time here. Primarily in my business unit, I support biosurgery and wound closure and healing products. That is one of the core businesses of Ethicon, and it's pretty cool. It's not as fancy or glamorous as software, but still very important medical device, physical product work that I get to work on. I'm currently based in Philadelphia. I'm actually literally moving to the Raritan, New Jersey area in a couple days. So you can see my bookcase is a little bit empty. But yeah, I'm physically moving, but I've been based in Philadelphia for the last 6 years. but I'm going to be moving to Raritan, New Jersey, which is like central New Jersey, for this job. I work very closely with industrial designers and other human factors engineers and part of the broader IDHF team. The team itself is very interdisciplinary, so everyone comes from very different backgrounds as well. So unlike consulting, where I was among all of the same type of person, now I'm amongst very cross-functional group of people. So I work with not only industrial designers, but mechanical engineers, chemical engineers now, that's a new one for me. I also work with project managers and clinical people and lab technicians. So it's all very interesting and different kinds of perspectives.
Great.
What else? On my business, I'm actually the only human factors engineer. So going from a world where I'm among many human factors engineers to just the single person supporting all of these businesses is a little crazy, but it's really exciting to be able to share my expertise in this new role. And in particular, my role is I'm really the advocate for the user throughout the entire product development process. So I'm ensuring their best practices and usability research that I've learned before and applying them here in actual industry. So I'm not only conducting research, but I'm more coordinating research and getting inputs from my entire cross-functional team.
Great. Thank you all for providing that detail. And may I note for this panel is that not only are our panelists involved in different roles and have gone through different organizations during their time, but they also work with different types of people. And that's one of the reasons we want to have this panel, because, I felt like when I was talking to CBS students, they weren't sure what they can do, but there were some similarities between CBS and human factors. And then with engineering psych, there are some similarities. So it's kind of refreshing to hear that all of you at some point have worked with different types of people in your field, and not one major predicts the type of people that you might be around in your current role. So my next question is, what has been, just to give us an understanding of what you do, if you can you comment on a recent project that you've been involved in that you would describe as both challenging and exciting?
Should we do the same order, or did you want
Sure.
to?
Anyone could start. Maybe you want to think about it. If Gina, you're ready to start, you can start. A recent project that you've been involved in.
Okay, yeah, I can. I think I can think of one. I joined GitLab like less than a year ago. So it's a really technical product, and I'm working with like front end and back end developers. So having some knowledge of like computer science and just like code knowledge is helpful for me, at least to be able to ramp up. And specifically in GitLab, I work with runners, which is they're like job agents. So they help run the code that ends up deploying into like a website, for example. The most like difficult part of that was being able to ramp up and actually learn what runners do and all of the use cases that needed to be solved for. So the project that I was working on was solving these really like specific problems that enterprise customers were facing with runners. And I'm still working on improving like the experience and being able to research exactly what their pains are and design for them. But we've been making really huge steps in the process since I joined. And yeah, that's all.
Great, thank you. Emma or Isha, a recent project or something maybe that you do in your job that you would describe as both challenging and exciting?
Yeah, we can go in some order. I am currently working on this study where I asked people, 10 participants across the US, to follow both the Olympics and the Russia-Ukraine war and compare the role of visuals and photography as they're presented on the New York Times to help us better understand, one, what visuals are for and how we can better present them, and two, like how we can measure the success of imagery and photography and how we can improve our report with better visual journalism. So that's currently what I'm working on right now. It was really exciting, really cool to be able to work on something that's happening right now, and to get to talk to participants about it is really cool. That's probably my favorite part of my job, is being able to like have conversations with people who are trying to understand the world, and being able to make sure that we're giving them everything that we can, and they're able to sift through our coverage, which is hard actually. So I'm trying to improve that.
So I know I talked about what I'm working on currently, but I actually wanted to talk about a past project that I worked on last year, where I actually supported a different business, which is in robotics and digital. It's a very, very cool and exciting kind of product, a highly complex surgical system, which is like crazy to like wrap your head around. There's so many different components, there's so many different teams, and a lot of work had already been done on the product. So my job was to execute research and get about 6 teams. So not only one participant, but having multiple participants at the same time in a session is also kind of fun. And having to design the study and including so many different components of the system. So not only instruments, but where the surgeon would be sitting, where the table and arms would be located, and how they would be interacting with one another. And then also with the tower, their interface with the software components. So it was physical components and software components that was challenging to have to design a study around, but also exciting to the fact that we could actually have the system working in this period of time where you developed it to a certain state and you're like, yes, we can finally use it and we can actually do something with it. So that was really exciting. So everyone was like, this is our one huge study for the whole year, and everyone wanted to get their inputs into the study. So we ended up collecting so many requests that the sessions ended up being 5 hours long. So it's a very, very long day, long sessions, and I had to make sure all of the data was captured, and we're looking for all the things that we needed to capture. So in my world, in medical devices, we really make sure that the product is safe and effective for use. So not only can they use it and it's like fun and cool and they have a good experience and it's easy, but is it safe? So I'm looking for a lot of safety concerns, especially in the OR where there's sterility concerns, there's sharps concerns, injury concerns, and all of those things are things that was a challenge for me to have to plan out and really think through, how am I going to make sure I collect this data? But we also talked about like working with different kinds of people. So I had a huge team, and I also had to work with marketing. So we had to share, I don't know if our other panelists also have this issue with marketing, but marketing thinks they know how to do usability. It's not really the same thing. So it's kind of a challenge to have to work with them and kind of how to explain our jobs and really what we're trying to do that's different from preference data. So I think that was kind of a big project that we ultimately were able to pull off the whole week of really long days, but we were able to collect the data that we needed, and everyone was happy with the result.
So that's a nice segue into my next question. In thinking about kind of your career path to your current position right now, was there a particular experience that you had, maybe even as an undergraduate or in the first job? Was there a particular experience that helped define that you were in the industry that you were meant to be? Or helped define your interest in the area that you're working in now?
I can switch it up if that's okay with you, Gina.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when I was an undergrad, I had the opportunity to intern at Airbnb. It was like a summer in San Francisco. It was really cool. And something that I got to do there, because I was an intern, nobody really cared what I did. So I got to work, I mean, they did, but I still could do whatever I wanted because I wasn't accountable to really anything. which is like a good way to use internships if you have one. And one of the things I wanted to explore was wheelchair accessibility. I have a mom who has limited mobility. It's something that I've been like passionate about my whole life pretty much. And I did they were like, okay, great, like run with it. So I worked with this researcher. I wasn't technically on the research team, and we wanted to understand what it was like for wheelchair users on the Airbnb platform, how they were using it, and how we could improve their experience. We did this whole project where we essentially like laid out the state of what it was like to be a wheelchair user on the Airbnb platform. And the experience was bad, like truly horrible. Something that a big insight that we found was that there are a lot of like levels of what people might be willing to tolerate in terms of like access, like step access. Maybe like someone would be willing to take their wheelchair across like one step, or how wide someone's shower is. So like things that are essentially more specific than this checkbox that was wheelchair accessible versus not wheelchair accessible. And at the same time, hosts were not educated on like whether or not to assess if their listing was wheelchair accessible. So I did this research. It was kind of a perfect storm. Airbnb had just formed an anti-discrimination product team. I presented it to them and they were like, okay, great. Like we can use this research. So they like redesigned the host flow. They did a ton more research after I left. They redesigned the host flow, they redesigned the guest flow, and now it's a lot better experience. I don't think it's a perfect experience, but they have people actively working on how to make Airbnb like a more wheelchair accessible platform. And when I did that project, I thought like every project in my career would be exactly like that. That hasn't been the case, but it was the thing that made me be like, wow, I really love investigating something and understanding like the nuances between what we know and what we don't know, and how we can better tell people's stories so that we can affect change at our company, whether that's like making it more easy for wheelchair users, or in the case of the Times, like making it easier to digest a story. And I think that project like really sparked in me that I was like, oh, this is what I want to do in my career. And I feel really lucky that I got to do it.
Thank you for sharing that aha moment. And Gina.
So I can think of one when I was actually younger, like before I got to college. My mom was getting her master's in human computer interaction. And I remember she used to always have me review her papers for the course. And that's like, I think when I first was introduced to what user experience is and like what being a product designer for software would be like. And that's kind of when I first thought that that's the direction that I wanted to go in. So before I even came to Tufts, I was looking specifically for which schools had majors that would support that career, and Tufts obviously did. So that was a huge factor in picking the school that I wanted to go to. And then outside of that, since I've been working in the field, I had an internship with Red Hat while I was at school. It was when I was a junior, I think, in college. And I specifically did a project using Sketch, which is one of the design programs you can use. It's for Macs. And I learned about Sketch libraries, which was like being able to make symbols so that everybody else in your group can create mockups using those symbols, and it's all consistent. And I learned like exactly how to make them and how to share them. And I think that was when I realized like, oh, wow, what I'm doing is really helping people, because I am increasing like their productivity during the day because everybody can use the same thing. It's all consistent, and it makes their job easier. And that was just a huge, like, that was a good thing for me to realize, because I really wanted to help people. And that's kind of why I got into this field. So that helped me like figure out that, okay, I think I'm on the right path.
Great, great. So I'm going to take a break from the current career questions and ask our panelists to go a little bit further back and think about your time here at Tufts. For your major, I don't know if all of your answers might be similar, but for your major, what was your favorite class or what was your favorite activity that you were involved in at Tufts that might be related to your career or your major?
Yeah, I can go first this time. So my favorite class at Tufts that was related to the major is actually ENP 161. And also Hal's class. I don't know what it's called, but it's like an industrial organizational psychology class. I really love both of those classes because I felt that it was actually really applicable and relevant to the work that I'm doing now. It like specifically when you're thinking about how to design research, it was just very research oriented, and I didn't realize that this field was going to be literally research. Like that is what we do day in and day out, and so it's like part design, but it's rooted in the research. And so what I really enjoyed is getting to actually work on a specific project, having like a company come in and give you a problem statement. I've actually done that before. I partnered with Professor and Trillagator to do that, and that was really awesome to kind of give back to the students and give them a cool problem to solve. And just having the opportunity to interview people and redesign a product and work in the team. That was a really cool class that I really liked. But in Hal's class specifically, the industrial organizational psychology class, it was very different than what you learn in any of the other classes in the curriculum. I don't know if he's still there or still does it, but we got to like rebrand this company. I'm not sure if you all know Scoop and Scootery, the like ice cream place. So good. You have to have their ice cream. So we got to like rebrand them. We got to interview them. It was a really cool project and kind of really hone in on the skills that I utilize today.
The one class that was my favorite was also ENP. It was ENP 166, User Interface Design. This was the first class that I really tried to design software, and it was for real industry problems. Like Emma was saying, it was for specific, like either made up companies or real companies, and you had to solve the problem and make these like large, not portfolios, but it was like deliverables to give them. And the process that you go through for each homework assignment was really applicable to like what you're actually doing in the industry. And that I think was my favorite class and where I learned the most about product design.
My favorite, most applicable class was probably experimental psychology. You're like building on statistics, which is something that I kind of forgot when I left Tufts, but really wish I'd remembered everything about it because it is really applicable. But I loved like experimental design, like experimental psychology design. And I don't know if you said activities, but I worked in a couple labs at Tufts, and I thought that was really like psychology labs and child development labs. And I thought that was really helpful and was really enjoyable and gave me experiences that I didn't necessarily have in the classroom.
Yeah,
Great. That's exactly what I was looking for, because I think sometimes students feel like you do have to take classes to prepare for a career, but sometimes I'm glad that you added that level of detail, Isha, because sometimes it's the activities that we are involved in outside the classroom where we can actually brainstorm our interests and try new things out. So thank you. Was there someone else? Emma, you were going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to add another activity was the makerspace. I know it's evolved since I've graduated, but it just started becoming a thing when I was leaving out at the CEEO. And it was like such an awesome experience. They're really awesome people there. I think the makerspace moved now, but I really regret not spending more time there and really getting more hands-on experience, getting involved with other HFEs. I was part of the mechanical engineering program where we were just like machine shop, but I wish that I had more time in the other types of creative spaces.
Great. And I think on this call too, we reached out to quite a few student organizations as well that Robin told me about. So yeah, there may be people on the call that are involved in some of the activities that you mentioned. Some of you described some of the skills that you've learned in that first experience or in that class. Can you talk a little bit more, either for your current role or for your industry? What are some transferable skills that you've learned along the way? And when I say transferable, it could be, you know, from your classes or actually from your first internship. Some of you mentioned like design programs, learning how to effectively research, things like that.
Yeah, I said stats earlier, but I think the biggest thing that I learned at Tufts, and because like I was going there from the ages to 18 to 22, was like how to communicate and write. That's especially important at a place like the Times, but everywhere I've gone, like if you can't tell a story or if you can't communicate something or have like practice presenting things, like no one's going to pay attention to you. And a huge part of product design research professions is about like telling other people's stories, but also making sure that you are able to get a point across concisely.
I would definitely agree with that. Especially because like if you're trying to convey research, you know, you're hired or your role is to really advocate for the user. So if the person, either you are designing it or your stakeholders, they don't know what you're talking about, they can't relate to the research that you collected, you know, that's not really valuable to them. So that's a huge one, and especially technical writing. So in the engineering school, we wrote so many engineering reports and technical reports as part of the curriculum. And I would say that's transferable, but it's a very different style of writing in at least my field. So definitely writing is a lot more important than I expected it to be. So I had to learn a lot of that on the job or relearning how to write. But for me, also the transferable skills is like survey design. It seems like a very trivial skill or things to learn, but it's very important. And all the principles around being neutral and how do we, what are different techniques that we can use to conduct research and do survey design. That's super applicable and what I utilize every single day. So it's really, really, really important to really hone in on those things. And I do regret not paying attention more in stats class because that would have been helpful as well.
I can add on one more. I agree with everything that they both said, but the one thing else I can think of is the design thinking process. I learned that in a few different classes. It has obviously changed and evolved since we have graduated, but that was huge. And it's something like I would love to apply to my everyday work. I don't have enough time to do that, but it's at least parts of it are applied. So that was super helpful. And then I'll just reiterate, like communicating effectively is definitely, I think, like the most important skill I learned. And even for my company, when we're remote, fully remote, like communicating asynchronously is huge, and it's super important at GitLab, and being able to like communicate the problem and then the solution very clearly so that everybody has enough context to understand what you're talking about is super important.
So I didn't have that many questions because we got a lot of questions from students that registered for this event. When we get to the Q&A portion, which will probably be in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I want people on the call to just think about questions that you have for our panelists. And if you want, you can direct message them to Robin Kahn if you're feeling shy, or you can put them in the chat and Robin will see it. But I'm going to address a few of the questions that came in from the registration. in no particular order, but one person wanted to know from each of the panelists, how did you land your first internship? Your very first one, whether or not it's related to the thing you do now.
Through a professor. I asked a professor and said, hey, I don't have a job yet for the summer. What do you do, or do you know anyone hiring? And he, knew me and knew my work and put me in contact. And the rest is history.
I did the same. I worked with my, not mentor, I can't think of the word right now, but she was a professor for research. So I actually had my first internship as a research assistant, helping her with a grant that she was working on. And so just having like the relationships between your professors is really helpful if you want to get an opportunity.
Yeah, I had the fortune of having a sister who's in like the product management field, and she connected me with the person who like was hiring for the internship at Airbnb, and then I interviewed there, and that's kind of how it worked. I feel like when you're so early in your career, it's really hard to convince people to talk to you.
So that kind of transitions into my next question. Somebody wanted to know, what types of networking connections did you find most valuable, either in finding an internship or a job? How did you get them and how did they help you? So you might have already answered this, but if you have specific other ways, how did you, what types of connections did you create along the way?
Other Tufts students. I feel like that's huge. I think every job I've gotten except for one, I like asked a Tufts person to refer me to it. And I feel like that was huge because like there's so many of us, and I feel like this network is so vast and important. And important, is that a word? But like just like everyone's everywhere. Like I like asked my friend from Tufts who I met through comedy to refer me to the Times, and that's how it worked.
Yeah, I was going to echo the Tufts network. So even though I even after college, I couldn't land a job for a while. I was either being too particular or no one understood what human factors was, and I had to like explain myself so many times, and it got to the point where I was like, this isn't working. Like cold applications, like just applying online, didn't work at all. So I had to really go back to the network, go back to my professors again, who knew me, and they said, actually, I just had an alumni reach out to me looking to hire folks. So I'll put you in contact with them, who was also a Tufts alum. So through that network, that's how I landed my first job. And then how I got this job is actually through a client or through my work connection. So people who have worked with me in the past, after you get a job, like people learn how you work and your style, and it's very easy after that. But that very first job or those internships is very hard. My second internship, I got a job from a friend. So I asked a friend, my comp sci friends, they know everything. I asked them, I was like, yo, how do I get an internship in software, because they know where the software is. And then that's how I ended up at Pegasystems. So it was very cool. I wanted a lot of different experiences. So the Tufts network, key.
I agree. I don't really have anything other than the activities that you're doing at Tufts. Like I played basketball and I was able to talk to a lot of alums that used to play basketball, and that's how I actually landed one of my contracting opportunities.
So great to hear the power of networking. And I like the different audiences that you mentioned. So networking a lot.
Malika, I think froze. I have one question coming in from the chat, and then we'll get back to Malaika when she shows up again. So this is similar to that, only it's more about projects. So what kinds of projects are the most helpful for landing that first internship? And do you have any advice for how to figure that out?
I think that's something I struggled with a lot as a student. You know, how do you build your portfolio, right? I think it's kind of in that same vein. It really depends on what industry you want to go into. So I was like super focused on trying to be like digital or this or that, and I ended up in none of those places. So I think I cared way too much about what projects were, and I should have been focusing more about like what skills I wanted to build. So what I ended up doing is what did I do? It was like a student project. It was like a independent research project. And that ended up being like the most fruitful experience and most applicable to what I do today. Like I'll just hone on the research. So anything you can do that conduct some research, interview some people, find out what are some problems, like, and document that experience. You don't even have to like redesign a product or come up with a product. Just at least, you know, going through that research process was super valuable and super helpful.
Great advice. Isha?
Yeah, echoing the, like, it's really hard to build a portfolio when you haven't really worked anywhere. I think the cool thing about going specifically into design or research, I had a portfolio for both, and like my research portfolio contained things that I did at labs. I worked at the DevTech research group, which I actually think just moved to Boston College, which is a bummer. But they developed like helped develop like Scratch Junior and Kibo, and I was working on a project there. Yeah, echoing like the skills part of it too. I really had a really hard time finding a job after graduating, and immediately like 6 months after that job ended because like they had layoffs, the company went under. And something that I was able to carry through all of that is just like the ability to have a good conversation with someone. It was like, I felt like so much more confident after going to Tufts. Like, I feel like I was able to really grow in to someone who was able to like speak eloquently about my skills and kind of like bullshit a little bit, honestly, too. I like was trying to sell people on
the power of bullshit.
Yeah, I was trying to tell people on like me and like my potential, and that's a really hard thing to do. And I think at Tufts you kind of learn that, or you like have to learn that a little bit too.
Gina, do you want to say something about projects?
I was just gonna add quickly, like especially because our field is still not really well known, and like I think it's getting more traction, especially in the software space, but you really have to sell human factors also sometimes. So it's also hard to do that without some help.
Yeah, I can add real quick. Whether or not you have, like, if we're talking about portfolios, I think whether or not you have actual designs to show isn't as important as the process that you go through. So for my first internship, they had me do solve a design problem on the spot, which was nerve-wracking, but it wasn't really like the outcome that I landed with that they cared about. It was more of like going through, like I said, the design thinking process, literally going through that and showing them that I knew generally like how to go through it, how I can explain myself as I go through those steps, and then what the outcome would be, even if I can't make that mock-up or visual or whatever it happens to be. So I also echo that making a portfolio is difficult, and I was not confident in mine before I graduated, because I was like, I cannot be good at being a designer. So it's nerve-wracking, but if you concentrate more on the flow, like I said, I think that will help you showcase your abilities.
Thanks so much. Back to you, Malaika.
So thank you. Sorry I cut out. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. And as I take it, we were talking perhaps about portfolios and how to build your portfolio. something like that. So we do have resources on building a portfolio. So at some point during this session, I'm going to ask Robin to maybe post that in the chat so that people have that as a resource.
I
But
just
one of
put it
the
up.
Perfect. And then I'm also at this time, and anyone on the call at the end of this session, maybe tomorrow, we're going to post some supplemental resources and email those to you just so that you have it. But what I was hearing before I got cut off is the power of networking. And I think that's what I was saying, that I'm pleased to hear that people think outside the box of networking. And I'm always trying to tell students that network is not just with alumni or professionals in the field that didn't go to Tufts. It can be with your faculty members, it can be with other students, and it can be with and that's essentially how sometimes people get leads on internships and jobs. So what I've posted in the chat is one of our alumni mentoring resources, which is called The Herd. You create a profile almost like you do LinkedIn, but any alum that you find in The Herd have basically said, I'm willing to be contacted by a current student. And you can use The Herd to search for alumni that have graduated within each of these 3 majors. And maybe you don't contact them and just look at their profile, or maybe you take that extra step and you do contact them and learn about what did they do after graduation, what did they do in order to find an internship, and how did they develop those skills that they needed. So just wanted to put that in as a resource for everyone. We might have already covered this, but one of the questions that I also had in signing up is, one student asked, what advice do you have for those who are interested in product design? It's a very general question, and I know all of you are designers in every way, but what advice would you give to somebody interested in starting a career?
I can go first. I would say, be open to any kind of product. So anything in human factors, we touch anything that people use, and that is a whole bunch of stuff. So I was like, for me, I was very fixated on like one kind of thing or one kind of application, but I ended up in a completely different place, and it ended up being like a really rewarding and meaningful path for me. So, if you're interested in product design, it's not only just about designing the product and doing that, but also, as we've been talking about the whole time, like the process that goes into that and the people you're going to impact. What kind of problems do you want to solve with this product? Or is someone already doing that and you want to hop on the bandwagon? So, explore and see where you end up.
I'm not sure I agree with everything that Emma just said. So the thing that most stuck out in my mind was that there's different paths you can go when you major in human factors or engineering psych. Like, you don't have to go directly into designing software. That was just one that I decided to go in because I felt like it aligned with what I wanted to do the most. But one of the things that helped me make that decision honestly was the location of where I wanted to be, which companies were hiring at the moment, where I could get the best job, honestly, and where I could get the best pay. So even though maybe ideally I wanted to do something else, I kind of just went with whatever I could succeed with the most after graduating.
Yeah, I think also with product design, I'm a researcher, so my portfolio and approach was really different, but I forget what class it was, but we made a lot of interfaces, and my friend said that that was the thing that got them their first job out of college. I think it was computer user interface design. I don't remember what it was called. But I think just generally, I agree with what Gina was saying too. I was interested in the title that I was interested in, which was user experience researcher. And I tried to like find the whole swath. Like ideally, I would have found it at a place that I was really excited about. But my first job out of college, like I said, was like at a company that ended up going under, and it was actually not a good experience, but I was able to get that like first title. And I know this sounds kind of like silly or maybe like even skeevy, but like I was like, I've been a user experience researcher before, like you should hire me as a user experience researcher again. And it was much easier to make that sell for that second job than it was for that first job when I was like just a college student. And I could feel like I could have like done any number of jobs when I first got out of college. It just so happened like user experience researcher was like the best fit for me and was the title I ended up getting. And that career has like paid in dividends in terms of like how excited I am about it.
So on the topic of, I guess, job titles, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because one of the, and I'm posting this in the chat, one of the first things or activities that I have seniors do, if they're not familiar, is to visit the Tufts destination survey results. And so what you could do if you're not sure, of the job titles that are specific to this industry or job titles that might have been sought after by people in the major, you can go to Tufts destinations and look up cognitive brain sciences or engineering psych and see an example of some of the job titles that people have gone for, and then use that to brainstorm or research positions on Handshake. So that can be helpful just to see where people have gone after Tufts. One of the other questions that I have, and Isha, I'm going to, you mentioned that you were in a startup. I think also, Gina, you mentioned that you worked with a startup as well. And Emma, you said you worked at a smaller organization and then went to a larger organization. So this question applies to all three. Someone wanted to know what has been some of the major differences or your experiences working with consulting firms versus corporations or smaller organizations and large organizations. What are some of the differences that stand out to you?
I can go first. So I directly, I don't know if the others, have you all worked in consulting too? No, okay, you have. So I spent the majority of my career in consulting, and I really, really loved it. I liked the opportunity to serve clients, get to work on a wide variety of different projects and very quickly. So you're set to do very specific type of work. You get in, do your work, and get out, essentially. And it's nice to kind of develop those small, quick relationships with your clients. And then, if they like you and work with you again, then they come back for more work. So I really like that kind of vibe because it was fast-paced, very focused to what you are working on, and you get to master your skills very quickly. So I got a chance to really develop my research skills very quickly and get to be thrown in a lot of different types of situations. So I became very adaptable at my job. So that's what I really liked about consulting. Now I moved to a huge corporation, and it's very, very different. So I'm currently trying to work out what those differences are at the moment. But essentially in the corporations, I've been seeing it's very free form in my experience. It's less rigid, things move a little bit slower, and it's more relationship based. So rather than getting your task done and get it out the door, it's more like, how do we talk about it? How do we want to strategize? Where do we want to go from here? And then all of a sudden, I see timelines of 10 years into my future. I'm like, oh God, what's going on? So it's definitely a very, very different kind of vibe, but the types of work that I'm doing is very similar because I've also stayed in the same industry. So all my skills are transferable between them. It's just very different cultures.
I second a lot of that. Consulting for me has been a little different because I work part-time for consulting. So I do 10 to 15 hours a week with these different projects. And like Emma said, they're very like short-lived. Everything is just do your work and like get it done. And there's less of a relationship to build, in my opinion, because there's, at least for me, there's less time for me to meet with everybody at the company. So I really only build relationships with the people that I'm directly meeting with. It's not like I'm meeting with more people of that group that have different titles, for example. But what's been good about consulting is I am introduced to all of this different technology that I would not have been introduced to otherwise. I think I'm learning a lot in that way. And then that versus like working at Red Hat, which was 20,000 people, it was really just like you get more time to work on each problem that arises, at least in my experience. And you, like Emma said, like you just build more relationships with people that are on your team. It also so happens that I was mostly the only designer in the consulting opportunities that I had. So I had less people to bounce my ideas off of. It was more of just like, give me the design so I can start implementing it. So it was very different. Like I had to be very confident in the designs that I was creating for consulting opportunities.
Yeah, I haven't worked in consulting, but I've worked in different sized companies. Is that, oh, yeah, okay. My first job out of college was like a 100-person startup. Then I worked at Wayfair, which was a 14,000 person company. So that was like a huge shift. And then I worked at Condé Nast, which was smaller, and now I work at the Times, which is smaller than that. But something that I've learned is maybe size is like one part of the equation. I think it's like perception of resources and investment into your department that I've really found to be like a huge factor. So like at Wayfair, for example, the research team was really small and people didn't really like to invest in it. It was really hard to get resources and time from people, because research is, I think, is best as like a team sport, like when everyone's listening in on sessions or like going through results with you. That was one part of it. Whereas at Condé Nast, the research team was also fairly small, but people really liked to like read and digest and be invested. And it was really easy to get like help from outside. And then I think at the Times, like it's like the most mature research organization I've been in. Like this is actually the largest research organization I've been in, which is like 20 people, whereas previous companies was like 3 people, 5 people, 2 people. And I think what the reason I decided to go to a larger research organization was I felt like I was at a point in my career where I was tapping out on what I was learning or the skill sets I could grow. And I really wanted to be in a place where I could work with other researchers and work with people who had a similar discipline to me and knew a lot more than I did. Whereas at previous roles, I was like kind of one of a few researchers, one of the more experienced researchers, which is wild considering like how early I am in my career. And that also speaks to like the amount of investment the company wanted to make in research too. And I feel like if you can get a sense that the person who's going to be managing you is really invested in your growth, as well as the organization itself has a lot of interest in growing this area and leveraging this function to contribute to its like company-wide growth, I think that's maybe more important to me than like the size of the organization. But that being said, at a bigger company, you're more likely to have a bigger team.
Oh my gosh, yes, 100%. Especially with your manager being invested in you. So regardless of like the size of your team, right? Like if you have a good manager relationship and you see that investment in not only you, but everyone in the organization and growing that's huge. And that's why I stayed where I was for so long. So there are other hidden things to look out for in your job, definitely.
All right, so I really only have 2 more questions at this point, but just a reminder, this is officially the question and answer period of this event. So if you have any questions, you can direct message them to Robin Kahn or put them in the chat and she will review that. So seeing as this is Women's History Month, and I mentioned that you guys are all contributing to the history of women, can you talk or comment on what it, if anything, what it's like to be a woman in your industry or in your business or in your department? And this wasn't a question I had prepared, but not everybody has to answer, but if you do have an answer.
I can answer really quickly. Research, I think specifically in software, maybe, I don't know, Emma, what your experience has been, is like a fairly like female dominated field, which like engineering is like a fairly male dominated field. I think product design, I don't know, it's maybe like a mix of both or maybe also male dominated. And it's really interesting because it like maybe feels like more of like a care like operation almost. It's like advocating for people who like don't get advocated for. And I think maybe that's why like women are drawn to it. That being said, like I have worked with researchers of different genders. But yeah, I think that's one aspect of it. I think that has its like, they're like also potential like implicit biases against women in that. It's also like a fairly white field. I think this is the first team I've been on where I haven't been the only person of color. At the times, and I think partially it's because it's like 20 people, but every research team I've been on up until this point has been like entirely white, I think, except for Airbnb, which also had a really large research team, but every like real job I've had.
I'd echo the same thing. It's not what you expect it to be in school. I don't think school is really reflective of, you know, what it's like in the real world, especially for me and in the engineering program. I mean, Tufts is like really gung-ho about high percentage women in engineering, and that's why I really wanted to go to Tufts. So I was really excited about that and had that experience. And you know, working with everyone was awesome, but it is very female dominated. So I didn't really ever have that like, oh, I'm the only woman in a room situation, or like some stories you would hear about, you know, typically what the stereotypes are of being like the only woman in the room or in the field, which was great. I didn't have that experience, but so I think it was also kind of hard to relate to other engineering disciplines because it's not the same in our field as it might be in other disciplines.
Thank you for adding that. Go ahead, Gina, sorry.
I was going to just say that my companies are pretty equally spread with gender for the UX department, at least at GitLab. But one area that it is completely different is one of the consulting jobs that I work with Instacart for. And it's probably because I'm the only designer, but I work with all males at that company. And it is sometimes difficult for me to, even though I've been working since 2018, it is sometimes difficult for me to like back up the things that I'm trying to say or suggest. And they have very, like their ideas are sometimes like more important than mine. It seems like that's the vibe that comes across. So it does get me a little like self-conscious, I guess, when I'm meeting with them. And I think, again, that's like just partly because I am a female and I'm thinking about that. And then I kind of think about it more once I go into meetings with them. And then it just makes me more hesitant in the work that I do for them. So I have, like I said, I haven't really been experiencing that outside of that company, but it was like a very different experience once I got into it.
So we have two more questions, and one from the chat, which Robin has, which might be similar to what I'm going to ask or not. At this time, we have just a couple more minutes of the Q&A. I know that Isha has to leave at 5:45. Gina and Emma, if you could direct message me and let me know if you're able to stay until 6, that would be helpful. So my next question, it sounds like some of you had to relocate after graduation or recently relocated. Can you where are you originally from? And what was that like transitioning to a new city? I think that might come from some seniors in the group.
So I'm from the Maryland, DC area, and a lot of my Tufts friends actually relocated to the DC area because they were international relations majors. So like, see ya, bye. Gave them some recommendations. I actually wanted to stay in the Boston area, but I couldn't get a job in the area, so I ended up in Philadelphia. So I relocated to Philly after Tufts. I really enjoyed it. It's also a kind of small, quote, small city like Boston. Lots of similar vibes, similar kind of types of activities exist, and they're both on the East Coast. So it was a pretty like smooth transition in terms of like culture. But I'd say like for me, transitioning just from school to adulthood to the professional world was actually a pretty hard transition for me. You're surrounded by all your friends in school for so long, and then you have to figure out how to make friends in the real world. So I think that was hard for me. I had to be a lot more comfortable with doing things by myself, or like seeking out things myself, and knowing like I might not have a friend to come along with me. So kind of like gaining that sense of independence was a big transition for me. But I ended up being okay. And now I'm transitioning again to a new city. So we'll see how it goes.
Cool. Isha, would you like to go next, since I know you have to leave soon? And I think somebody wanted to know exactly from you, Isha, what it's like to live in New York.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I also will say like the transition out of college was tough. I lived in Boston for the first couple of years. And I like really wanted to move to San Francisco, and then I stayed in Boston, and that was the perfect choice for me, I think, at the time, because I don't think I would move to San Francisco now. So I'm glad that I stayed on the East Coast. I'm from the Bay Area also. That's important context. Yeah, so I moved to New York a few years ago, and I thought it was a really great like transition from Boston too. I think the things I love about New York is it's like really culturally, just like a cultural hub. Everyone here like is really interested in culture. I might be in a specific enclave because I've only worked in media here, but like there are like always gallery openings or shows or things that people are down to go to. Something that I got really annoyed with in Boston was that the only thing people would do after work is like go drink. And I feel like in New York, it's like a little bit of a mix of a bunch of things. And I really like that. I don't like Times Square, which is where my office is. I try to leave as quickly as I can anytime that I'm here. I live in Brooklyn, and it's really similar, I think, to Cambridge or Somerville. And what I love about Brooklyn is that A, it's like a really easy commute to the office, but B, it's just like open, and there are trees, and there's like everything that you could possibly want, like really good food. Yeah, I think I'm glad that I chose New York, because I think in San Francisco, everyone I knew worked in tech, and in New York, not everyone I know works in tech or in media. I think there's like more diversity of professions, and I really value that, and I'm really glad that I live here. I would recommend it if you're looking for a city to move to.
And Gina, very quickly, where are you from, and where are you now? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I didn't really move much. I stayed in Massachusetts the whole time. So I'm from Hopkinton, Mass. I then lived in Boston for 3 years, and now I'm in Uxbridge, Mass, which is like out in the suburbs. I didn't have like as big of a transition, I would say, other than moving from the city, which I found out I didn't really like being in, and then moving back to Uxbridge, which is where most of my family lives. And I now live by myself at my house.
Great, thank you. And this is close to the time that Isha has to leave. So Isha, I'm going to have you answer this last question first. My last question for the group is there anything that you would have told your college self? Looking back, any advice that you wish you had received or what you would tell your college self?
Yeah, I was really anxious about like things working out, and I think I would tell that person that things will work out. Like a reason that you go to Tufts is because you're like a smart and capable person, and like that doesn't change once you graduate, even though it totally feels like it does. I think also the big thing that I would have said is like meet as many like older mentor like people as you can. Like you don't have to have a bunch of mentors, but something I wish I had done more at Tufts is like go to more of like these kinds of events or like met more alumni or talk to more people who were in fields that I was interested in. And I feel like that would have really clarified some things for me earlier on. I eventually got there, but maybe it would have helped me. I chose cognitive and brain sciences because I didn't want to choose a major, and it has a bunch of different classes in it. So I think getting more information and knowing that you'll be okay. And with that, I'm probably going to go. But thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Sam.
Emma or Gina, who would like to go next? What advice would have told your college self?
I can try. I think as Isha had said, like attending more events. I wish I had done that. I think when I got my full-time position offered when I think I was a senior, because it was when I had an internship and then they offered me a full-time position after that. Once I got that position, I was kind of like, well, I don't need to care anymore. And I didn't go to networking events. I didn't really like pay attention in my classes that were outside of my actual major. And now looking back, I'm like, I would have learned something if I actually did that, or I would have made more connections if I went to these networking events, that then I wouldn't have to put in so much effort after I graduated to make those connections. So that would be a big thing.
I feel like I have kind of the opposite advice. I was that kid that like went to all of these things, and like I was very heavily involved in SWE. I went to SWE conference every year. I did like all of the workshops that Tufts like sent through their way just to like get involved and meet so many people. But I was also like really banking on having all of those connections like pan out to something. Like every time I would go to a career fair, I'm like, I'm going to get a job from this career fair. And then I never ended up getting a job through a career fair. And so I think like I was like really hard on myself in those situations where like I had this expectation that like I'm doing all the right things, I'm doing all the things that people told me, and like it's still not working out. And I think for me, it was just like a sign that I was meant to go elsewhere. Like I was meant to find my path in a different way, and that was okay. So, you know, no matter how you end up, wherever you end up, if you really want to, you know, if you're really dedicated, you're like, I really want to go into software, I'm going to make this happen for myself, like Gina, then like, awesome, you can do it. And for me, I wanted to stay in the physical product world. I'm like, cool, we're going to lower the bar a little bit and just, you know, see where the wind takes me. So I think I just needed to be a little bit more open, and just, I'll echo what Isha said, like, you're going to be okay. It is a little scary, but you will be fine, and know that you and yourself, you are still the same person, and you've gotten this far, and you just have so much more to learn and explore.
So thank you all answering that group of questions. I'm sure that people on the call are taking notes on steps that they can take or not take.